James Buckland and I, we're going to talk about crime. We're going to talk a lot about crime, a lot of things happening this week. We'll get you updated on the Karen Reed case. We're going to also tell to you about the Menendez brothers and Lori Vallow and something else that just happened today. Join us for this next 30 minutes of what some people are calling the fastest minutes in crime talk.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of Charlie Crimebuster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
James, we got a lot going on, buddy.
Yes, sir, we do. There's a lot going on. Four
Yep.
cases.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Wow.
First of all, before we get into our program, let the folks know all about our YouTube channel and about some of the stuff that they have access to through Charlie Crimebuster.
I will do that. Thank you, Charlie. Well, here at Charlie Crimebuster, we want to let people know that we welcome comments, suggestions, opinions, and whether you agree or disagree with us on a few or on a topic, we still want to hear from you. So give us a shout out. Give Charlie a shout out at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Or you can call or text 407-917-2211. That's 407-917-2211. And if you reach out with a shout out or text Charlie, you will get some behind-the-scenes updates and more. Also, this podcast is sponsored by peacemakerNetwork.com. We want to say thank you to all of those who support our podcast and the men and women, first responders, law enforcement, and military by being a monthly badge member, BADGE member, and subscribing to the peacemakerNetwork.com. So if you would like to become a member, simply go to peacemakerNetwork.com. That's peacemakerNetwork.com. And if you're a true crime junkie, we still would like to encourage you to binge-cast, as we call it, by listening to our many archive podcasts located on our YouTube channel. That's on our YouTube channel. Every single podcast that has ever been made with Charlie Crimebuster is on the YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/the and Charlie Crimebuster. Also, our podcasts are on many other popular podcast platforms. Just simply search for Charlie Crimebuster, or you can ask your smart speaker to play Charlie Crimebuster. And so since you're streaming us here on YouTube now, if you would please just reach down there with your little mouse click and click that subscribe button, and you'll be notified each time we drop a new episode. And we would like to give you a huge, huge thank you for doing so.
There we go. James, I think we have to start out tonight, unfortunately, talking about a sad situation that happened here in the state, and that is the Florida State University shooting, where today two people who were not students were killed and five others wounded in a mass shooting at the Florida State University. And James, this is really, really sad in so many ways. First of all, it's sad that students today sometimes find themselves in dangerous situations on our campuses and our schools. But beyond that, the investigators are now telling us that the shooter, who was neutralized by a quick reacting Florida State University Police Department, this shooter, unfortunately, was the son of a Leon County deputy and had actually participated in some of the sheriff's programs for civilians. So this is a sad day especially for the people of Florida State, and also a sad day for Leon County that they find that themselves are drugged through this. In fact, everything I've heard about his mother was she's an outstanding deputy, and so I can imagine that a lot of families tonight are facing a very, very heavy burden, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The loss of any loved one just weighs heavily on, whether through sickness or through a shooting, especially with violence, it even weighs even more heavier on your family.
Yeah, and I would encourage folks when they go to YouTube channel and look at some of our episodes. We have several episodes on mass shootings. We even have one on that you can find out several different things that you can do to try to stop a mass shooting before it happens. Some of the signs to look for. We talked about the various stages of a mass shooter, and if you can catch them in those early stages, then sometime you can prevent a shooting, which has happened time and time again. So I just encourage folks, don't get too far away from that. Take a moment to go to our YouTube channel, look up some of the mass shootings that we've covered, and you're going to get not only the news of the mass shootings, but you're going to get some very, very practical steps on how you can help save others in these types of situations. So we just do want to take a moment on the podcast tonight. We're recording this in real time, and real time with us is today was the day at 11:50 when this gunman, a young guy, student guy there, opened fire on campus, killed two people, wounded five others who are in the hospital right now. And we'd just like to say to all those folks that they are in our prayers and in our thoughts.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's talk about a lot of stuff that's happened today. I think we'll start off the Menendez brothers.
Yeah,
We've been covering that, and found out this week that it gets gone back before the judge.
well, and actually, the judge has ruled that there's going to be a retrial.
Yep, yep. Well, the judge basically, I think one of the real interesting things about this is that last night, on Wednesday night, they tried to the district attorney tried once again to delay the trial, and it was a little different approach to delaying that trial.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, what he basically has said, the district attorney has basically stated that they did a risk assessment
Uh,
upon the Menendez brothers, and he wants to make sure that the judge has this in hand and will consider this in the resentencing. And basically, the district attorney is saying, "Hey, I don't think these guys should be let out. I don't, I think they could be a danger to other people." And apparently, the risk assessment is certainly bearing that out, or he wouldn't be trying to make such emphasis on this risk assessment.
that's true. That's
In
true.
fact, this assessment was actually generated by requests from the governor of California. So now they're wanting to make sure the judge sees that. So lots of things are happening with the Menendez brothers, but nothing's going to happen until next week. Or actually, I think they've moved it now to what, sometime in May, right? That the
Yeah.
next
Yeah.
next part of it's going to be. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. In May. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's some news for sure. Now, one other interesting thing with the Menendez brothers to get you guys caught up is that the defense attorney has also made a motion to disqualify the district attorney
Yeah.
because he thinks that he's prejudiced. Well, I think he is prejudiced. He's prejudiced for the safety of the people of California. He's prejudiced toward keeping people safe because you're going to put two really cruel murderers back on the street if the judge rules in favor of a liberal resentencing.
Are you are you saying that he's prejudiced toward justice?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Prejudice toward justice.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just
It's
can't.
his
I can't.
job.
I can't even believe we're talking about this because it amazes me. There are a lot of people who are locked away for the rest of their life who've done far less evil than these guys have,
That is
and
true.
they have no opportunity for resentencing. And frankly, I don't see the justification in resentencing these guys. But for you all who are fans of the Menendez brothers, you might have some relief. And these guys may be put back out in society. We really won't know until the next part of the trial.
Mm-mm-mm. So what's the latest on Brian Kohberger?
Well, Kohberger, we were talking last night. Why don't you tell me what the latest is? You've been kind of keeping up with Kohberger.
Yeah, yeah. I read where that they've the an FBI agent actually disclosed that the defense is working on an illusion. They call it an
Hmm.
illusion, where they're trying to basically what they did in the Casey Anthony case, where they proposed, and introduced doubt into the equation. So they're trying
Yeah,
to form an illusion.
yeah, kind of following the footprints. Interesting enough, day before yesterday, I was right there at Orange County Corrections and was standing right in the lobby when I don't know if you remember or not when they released her that night,
I do. Yeah.
and she walked through that lobby and she got in the car and they did all kinds of shuffling around to try to get her out of the sight of the press and take her to some place undisclosed.
Right.
That very place where she walked, I was standing there the other day, and it reminded me of that. And of course, her attorney basically, started off right off the bat trying to throw everybody he could under the bus.
Mm-hmm.
He
Mm-hmm.
he was going with the what we call some other dude did it.
Yep. Yep.
And that's probably what they're going to try to do there. I do know that in the Brian Kohberger trial or case, they had found some other male DNA there in the house, which isn't surprising because this was a party house, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
there probably going to be all kinds of DNA out there, but they're going to, I'm sure that his attorneys are going to try to say that, first of all, I also read where they were going to probably present the theory that it had to be more than one person that did this because one person couldn't do all that killing in that short amount of time. And then they were going to also probably introduce that there are other DNA there and try to show doubt on it. One thing I think is going to be really tricky for them, though. You remember James, they were talking about Brian Kohberger that he out when he was out driving around that he was out doing stargazing. That he liked to go around and look up at the stars and the sky. But the only problem is it was a cloudy night. I don't think you could see many
Exactly.
stars during that
Exactly.
time. So yeah, that's Kohberger. So that trial's going to come up, and it's going to be, I think, a fascinating trial. I do like the fact that the police department there, the investigators there, held all that very, very close to their chests. And James, they're still holding it close to their
They
chest.
are.
So
Yeah.
you don't see them getting up on TV, and trying to have press conferences
Nope.
and all that. They're just keeping it, close to their chests. They've done their work. They've been serious about doing good police work, and I think you're going to see a real tight case by the prosecution through the outstanding investigation skills that was brought to this case.
I agree with you there. Yeah, they've been really good about keeping things close to the chest, for sure.
Yeah, and hey, we
Absolutely.
can't forget now Lori Vallow case, right? That's going on too. In fact,
That's right.
the
Yeah.
state rested their case,
Yep.
and Lori says she's going to rest her case.
Yep.
I got to tell you something there's been something I've been very surprised about with this Lori Vallow case.
What's that?
I was listening to some of the trial and
Mm-hmm.
watching some of the videos, and she, for being her own attorney, she didn't do too bad.
She didn't do bad at all. No,
You,
I did the same thing.
I,
It's,
I was shocked. I really was shocked. I mean, she didn't get up and try to use it as a pulpit to preach her, crazy beliefs.
nope.
She actually, when I know she was the last time she was cross-examining this detective, and she said when Charles was killed, and Alex Cox said that it was self-defense. She asked the detective there. She said, "Well, let me ask you this: you're the detective in charge. Did you all take Alex's phone?"
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "No." He said, "Well, you're the detective in charge. Don't you think that's something that you do?" I mean,
Yeah.
she really, really had him on the hot seat for a while.
Yeah, she did.
And so I was just, I just thought, I was just shocked that she did as good as she did defending herself. The only problem is she doesn't have a case. I mean, the
Yeah.
case is just. I think it's pretty clear what happened there, and I think she's going to go down for it. But yeah, I guess the other thing I'm surprised, I think she really enjoyed getting in the limelight, being, her own attorney.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised that she's going to rest her case too. I would think that she would try to drag that out a little more.
You would think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Enjoy some of that freedom. Yeah.
Yeah. So folks, to get you up to, caught up to that, they've rested their case. She's going to rest her case. They're not going to have any more trial this week, and then of course we have the Easter weekend, so we won't be really coming back to this trial to Tuesday. And on Tuesday, more than likely, They could get to opening statements. There's going to have to be some jury instructions, and they're going over all that kind of stuff right now.
Yep.
Anything else stand out to you about Lori Vallow?
And nothing that stands out to me about Lori Vallow or the Brian Kohberger or the Menendez brothers at this point.
Yeah,
So
that's a
where are we?
lot, a lot of things going on at one week, right?
well, well, it's nice that we recap because we have listeners that follow us and they want to know where because we have cases that are kind of hanging out there. They want to know where we are with each case. So this is good.
Yeah, I've seldom seen that many, really national cases being tried at the same time. It's kind of incredible.
Yeah, and it is for a crime junkie like ourselves. It's exciting.
Yes, it is. Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah.
So on to Karen Reed, which is our
Hmm.
next our fourth case that we're covering. Um, in your podcast, you said that you thought the jury would be selected this week. Did that happen?
Yes, it did. They selected 9 men and 9 women. Now, keep in mind that 12 of them will be the actual jury. The other six will be the other six are going to be what they call alternate jurors, and so they've already seated the jury, and they're getting ready next week, all getting geared up there as well. We might have some opening arguments. I'm sure we will. I
Hmm.
said I thought that they would actually get to that point, and they certainly did. There was some interesting things though with some of the motions going on in this week to get people. I think one of the most interesting things that happened because before they get into the trial, there's all kinds of pre-trial motions. And the one thing that really stood out to me this week and that's why we tell folks, if you listen to the podcast, please make sure you listen to Crime Talk because we find new stuff,
That's
that
right.
we didn't have at that point. And so what had come up this week is, remember Turtle Boy?
I sure do. Yeah.
Turtle Boy Carney, who is the podcaster out there and the blogger out there who
Yep.
got all the people riled up and free Karen Reed, free Karen Reed, free Karen Reed. So they were talking about bringing him in as a witness, but the Turtle Boy decided to crawl back under his shell, and he said that he's not going to testify. He's going to plead the fifth.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
That's very
And
interesting.
so they had a back and forth on that this week about whether he was eligible to plead the fifth. It certainly is. I think there's like 6 or 8 indictments right now of
Wow.
witness intimidations against him. And so he said he's going to plead the fifth. So I take that as Turtle Boy, going back under his shell like turtles do, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and he's not going to testify. If he does testify, he's going to plead the fifth, so they're not even going to call him, I don't think. And then what was really interesting to me when he was interviewed outside the court, he said, "Well, I think it's just all that was today was a whole lot of theater." Now you talk about theater. He thinks that's theater. He's all theater.
Yeah,
I mean
exactly.
that's what he does. But Turtle Boy, you're not going to see him being cross-examined on the stand in this next trial.
Interesting. Plead the fifth, huh?
Pleading the fifth.
Interesting. So with the timeline that you started talking about a controversy right off the bat, why was that?
Yeah, the controversy, if you haven't been following the case, controversy is that first, you start out and you say, okay, the timeline we're looking at now is in the trial coming up. The first trial ended in a mistrial, but that is the part that's controversy because there are 3 charges. There's second-degree murder, of course, and then there's causing the death of another manslaughter by being empowered with alcohol, and then there's another one leaving the scene of an accident that caused injury or death to someone as well. So those 3 charges. So the first jury had actually agreed on the 2 serious charges to actually say not guilty for Karen Reed.
Hmm,
But that wasn't really conveyed to the public or conveyed to the judge, and so the defense come back and said, "Hey, they agreed on those 2 charges. It's unfair to charge her again on what the jury agreed that she was not guilty on. That's double jeopardy. And so, as we all know now, that case is going before the Supreme Court. It has been ruled; it's been knocked down in the appeals thus far, but we'll see what the Supreme Court does. So that's the controversy that we're talking about. So right now, though, they're going full speed ahead with the three charges, including a second-degree murder.
Well, they interviewed Ronnie Estenslio. He was one of the jurors in the first case, the first
Mm-hmm.
trial.
Right.
And he said that they were not given proper instructions. They didn't ask for clarification, or rather, they didn't ask for clarification on the judge's instructions, and so they handled each case individually, and he wanted it all as one lump sum. It was
Yeah, and
all or none.
yeah, and the thing about that, I think that I do think it's very unfortunate it happened that way because I think the judge should have been more clearer on the instructions.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think also that her attorneys, as much as I think that they did such an outstanding job defending her, I think that they should have they should have polled the jury.
They
You
should
know.
have. Yeah, they
And
should
then
have.
maybe if they had done that, they may have been able to say and clarify the fact that they had agreed on those two, and it might be. But that's all water under the bridge, and now she's facing all three charges unless the Supreme Court comes back otherwise.
Well, other than the controversy that you just mentioned, you went on to mention the bar that they went and they met at. Why is that?
Well, the reason why, of course, we always do the timelines because it helps us to get a real perspective on what's happening as far as that
Sure.
goes. But the reason why I think it was important to mention the bar because all of these people had drank a whole lot of liquor, and so you got to kind of as a juror, if you're going to look at it in an honest way, you're going to realize that alcohol does impair you, alcohol does influence you,
Hmm.
and so you've got to recognize that this whole night, even including Karen and some of the things that she said, and one time she said, I don't remember anything. She said I was so drunk, I don't remember anything. But now she's remembering things. So I think
Mm.
you've got to realize that alcohol did impact this entire case, and one of the things that they brought out in some of the things that Karen Reed, she's not testified before, and she probably won't testify, but she sure has been in the media lately. Even another
Yeah.
Netflix deal, this sort of thing. So,
Yep.
by the way, I'm seeing now that the prosecution wants to try to find some of the things that she said and use those words against her. Because
Hmm.
even though they can't compel her to testify, they can certainly see some of these statements that she's made in public and on the
Hmm.
media, and they can use those, in that area. But I think the thing to keep in mind is that she didn't remember anything. Now she remembers stuff. There's certain things she said, and certain people think they heard her say some things. So you just got to realize. And one of the things they said, they said that this is an well, they talked about it happens every week that these cops get out there and they drink and they party and then they drive while intoxicated. Now, if that is true, that's terrible. You know.
Yeah.
And one Michael Proctor lost his job because of that. Not, he did several inappropriate things, but one of the things that was brought out in his hearing was he and one of the other detectives went out to eat one night, and they had plenty to drink, and he jumped in his patrol car, his assigned unit. He was a detective, his assigned unit, and he was driving that vehicle while he was under the influence. So I thought that drinking certainly, uh, alcohol is impacting this case. I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's
Wow.
why we talked about the bar.
Driving while impaired.
Yeah,
Wow. As a police officer.
yeah, yeah. And it could be that if you are listening and because people, James, you and I both know people are on one side or the other with this one.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, they either think that Karen is framed or they think Karen did it. Karen hit him with his car. But if she did, if you're with that group of people that says, well, she hit him with a vehicle, keep in mind that she was also, she was under the influence.
True.
She could have hit him, not even known she hit him, if that's what happened.
True. Well, how impactful was the voicemails that was shared at the first trial?
At the very first, I thought they were very impactful because they were just really, I mean, if you've heard them and if anybody's listening heard them,
Hmm.
she was so upset at him that night. And even prior to to that night, she was, you could tell that all wasn't well in that relationship. And I mean, she said some really terrible things to him through the night. Now, here's the thing to keep in mind though. If she had hit him and she did it intentionally, why did she then use all those voicemails all through the night and just really scream at him and call him names and all that sort of thing that certainly the prosecution did in the first trial, may do in the second trial? I'm sure they will do in the first trial. So either one or two things. Either she really did not know that he was lying in the snow and she was mad, or she's probably one of the smartest people we've ever seen to
Yeah.
do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly helps give her an alibi.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The prosecution thinking, well, this is good. We're going to show motive, because she was so mad at him.
Right.
But maybe they didn't realize they were also, in a way, giving her an alibi.
That's true. That's true.
Why would she say all that if she had known that she had hit him in the snow?
Exactly.
Unless, and unless you turn it on the other way, she's just trying to cover it up, and using that as a ruse to say, hey, I didn't know that. So.
Yeah. Well, you just mentioned snow. So what part did the weather take in this case?
Well, the defense did a very good job, I think, of really painting the Canton Police Department and even the state police into the corner where they were pretty well proving that it was a very sloppy investigation.
Yeah.
And before people, really jump on that bandwagon, though, I got to remind folks this was a northeastern. I mean, this was a terrible snow blizzard, and it's hard to preserve evidence in any situation. But if you've got a blizzard and you got a guy lying on the lawn that you think that there was an accident,
Hmm.
then you're not going to be as acute to doing the investigation that you should. The biggest thing I think they brought out is that they actually use red solo cups to gather evidence. And then also they had a bag that they were putting evidence in, which was a stop and shop. And, they made a really big deal with the jury and on the trial, hey, is this a way you investigate, crime? You put stuff in red solo cups. Well, keep in mind, snow was blowing everywhere. There was blood in that snow.
Yeah.
And you got to capture it some way, and you don't have time at that point to run to the crime lab or run back to headquarters and get this. You got to get that before that evidence goes away. So, in a way, that could be a pretty smart move, to capture that in that red solo cup at that time.
Yeah. But as an investigator, aren't you supposed to have that in an evidence bag and have it marked as to a specific number?
Yeah, well, they did that. The biggest thing that they were pointing out in the case was, you use red solo cups. Who used red solo? You think of red solo cups, what do you think about? Sitting around drinking beer, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But I guess what I'm saying, uh, I do agree it was a sloppy investigation, but I do understand that it was a tough scene to preserve when you have a blizzard coming down,
Yeah.
you know.
That's true.
And I think it's important for people to realize that there was no, the snow plays another part. I think a lot of people are saying that if he was lying in that snow after, if he didn't go into the house and he was struck by the vehicle and he was lying in the snow, then, the defense is saying, why didn't anybody, when they were leaving that house that night, see him lying in the snow? I mean,
Exactly.
all these people left the house, right?
Right.
Nobody reported, only one person that later on in the trial said they thought they saw a lump over there, but all of them said they didn't see it. But keep in mind, you got a blizzard going on. You got snow coming down. People are cold. They want to run and get in their cars.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it could be that snow was one of the reasons why they didn't see the body lying there. So I'm saying that snow, the blizzard pays, I believe it impacts this case quite a bit.
Interesting. But didn't Karen Reed admit basically that she had hit him? I mean, based upon what she said.
Yeah, I think that goes back to again, um, two or three things. Well, number one, it goes back to the fact that she was drinking and other people were drinking.
Hmm.
And so, she probably wasn't very clear in her thoughts. The defense is turning it around saying that no, she didn't say she hit him. She said, "Did I hit him? Did I hit him?" That she was confused. She didn't know. Did I hit him? How did this happen? How is he out here in the snow like this? And did I hit him? So, there are some of the first responders that say they said, "Hey, I thought I heard her say I hit him." And then when they were cross-examined, they said, "Well, a lot was being said that night. A lot going on. Are you sure you heard that? Could it have been that she said, 'Did I hit him?' as a sentence rather than 'I hit him'?" So there's a lot of, I think there's some doubt there.
Hmm.
I don't think that she totally confessed that she hit him, but I think the thought went into her mind, "Hey, did I hit him?"
Yeah.
Because she was intoxicated, and she was upset and all kinds of utterances with that. So I don't think you could say, and I think the first jury that the first trial said, they certainly didn't put a lot of credibility on a so-called confession because if they had, then
They
she
would have
would have been,
convicted her. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about the crazy crook story this
Well,
week.
the crazy crook story. This was a lady who decided to steal a vehicle. And then she was crazy enough to try to. By the way, folks, I hope I'm not giving you crazy crooks pointers on this podcast, but folks, if you're going to steal a car, it's really not best. It's really not best to go take it to a salvage yard to get rid of it, because
Yeah.
that's the first thing police check with.
That's
A
right.
dear loved one of mine was carjacked, and her car. Guess where we called him at? We called him going to the salvage yard
Uh-huh.
trying to get rid of it. So the first crazy thing is, if you steal a car, you shouldn't do that. But she even went even crazier, James. You know what else she did?
Tell me.
In her diary that she kept, she wrote the words, "Today I stole a car,"
Oh,
and
wow.
she put out the whole crime right there. So, they had a description of her from the salvage yard. They found her. They got a search warrant. They went in the search warrant. They opened up the diary, and there it says, "I stole a
Stole a
car."
car.
So the crazy crook was somebody who was foolish enough to try to get rid of a stolen car at a salvage yard. On top of that, decided just to put in writing that I did the deed.
There's the confession. There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, back to Karen Reed. Why is the broken tail light so critical in this case, you think?
Well, I think it's extremely critical. It's critical for both the defense and both the prosecution. For the prosecution is saying that there was parts of that tail light there on that yard, there where he lay that night and where he died that night. So there's no way that that tail light could be in the yard unless somehow she hit him and that tail light was broken while she hit him, and that somehow ended up being around him, and they found pieces of the broken taillight there, along with also a cocktail glass, as they say. That's for the prosecution. For the defense, it's important because they're saying now that Michael Proctor had time. In fact, they've got a video of him standing back behind that taillight, that he had time to get pieces of that taillight that had already been broken earlier that morning when she had backed out. And you can see the video where she came very close to a car, maybe even hit it.
Hmm.
And at least the defense is saying they hit it, so that the taillight was cracked there, and that he took that pieces of taillight and he planted it in the yard. So the taillight's important for not only the defense, but it's important for not only the prosecution, but also for the defense. So according to which way you lean, that taillight can actually prove either thing, with it.
Hmm.
Now, the interesting thing that the prosecution is coming back and saying, if she had backed into that car early that morning before she knew where John was, and that's when she busted the taillight, why weren't there pieces in the driveway around there?
Exactly.
So that's a good question. Of course, then the defense can come back and say, well, the same police officer that that planted this evidence could have had time to go and pick up that piece from there. So
That's true.
the tail light's important any way you go about it.
Well, let's discuss the infamous text.
Well, yeah, here's the other. I think the two most important pieces of evidence, two of the most important pieces of evidence, is the tail light and also the text. According to the defense, around 2 o'clock or something other in the morning, a little after 2 o'clock, there was a text from Brian Albert's sister that said how long to die in the snow. How long can you lie in the snow before you die? That's what it means. So if that really was, and their experts said it came at 2:38, a little after 2 o'clock in the morning.
Hmm.
If that text came at that time, then that person already knew that he was in the snow, which would give credibility to the story that he was beat up in the house and taken out in the snow to die. However, the prosecution's coming back now. The defense saying that that proves that Karen Reed didn't do this. The prosecution's coming back though, and they're saying this. And James, this is right up your avenue, so maybe you can give some light on this. They're saying that when you open up a Google search,
Hmm.
that if you don't close out that search and you come back to that same search an hour, 2 or 3 hours later,
Hmm.
then it's still going to show the time when you first opened that search.
That's right.
So what they're saying is that, yeah, she did search it, but it wasn't at 2 o'clock. She used that same link when she went back, and she did it in the morning after they found him lying in the snow, and that Karen had asked him, hey, could he die out there in the snow that way? And so that she actually did the search after they found him the next day. And that makes a big difference.
Sure.
Because if that search was done at 2 o'clock in the morning, then that really is real a probable doubt. I mean, that's doubt for sure against the
Hmm.
guilt of Karen. But if it was back there at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, it's a whole different thing.
Agreed. So, what do you think that is will be different in this case?
Well, there's going to be a couple things different. I think the prosecutor that they have now, the new prosecutor they have,
Hmm.
is very skillful and can really, Jackson is a phenomenal attorney.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yannetti is too. Both of them are good attorneys, and I think that they came across a little more believable than the past prosecutor. This prosecutor, though, he is a former defense attorney, and he knows how to talk to juries, and so I think you're going to see that this case is going to be a whole lot tighter. I think that they're going to have a better expert to reconstruct the accident.
Hmm.
Trooper Paul was a great guy, great trooper, but he was out of his league when it came to him standing up against the ARCA investigators
Right.
that came into it. But I think that the prosecutor will have a more polished, more learned, more qualified expert to testify that his wounds came as a result of being hit by the car. The second thing that we're going to see in this trial is that during that first trial, uh, Jackson kept saying, these Archi guys who are saying that those wounds are not consistent with being hit by a car, they are, they're not biased. They were hired by the federal government to investigate the investigators.
Hmm.
So they were not biased. Well, guess what? After the trial, they found out now that the defense actually paid them amount of money, several $1,000s, 20 something $1,000, uh, paid the Arca investigators. So now they are going to allow the Arca investigators to testify, but the defense cannot say now that they're unbiased. The defense cannot say that that they are just basically that they're basically, just going to give an unbiased thing. So they're going to say, hey, these guys are the balked experts by the defense. So I think that's going to make a difference.
All right. Well, this has been a nice summary.
Yeah, a lot of stuff to cover, huh?
Right. Thank you, Charlie. This has been a great podcast this week.
Boy, everybody need to get their seatbelt on. We're going to go. This thing's going to go to trial next week, man, and it is going to be one fantastic trial. I think we're going to see some of the best lawyering. Is that a word? Lawyering.
Lawyering.
So until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. Yep, for the life you save, it could be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.